Good evening, my fellow Americans. It is I, Kyle Silagyi, joined this and every week on the Cover One Roundup, or not every week actually, but joined this and every week by David Fox. And I'm not going to lie, I was a bit concerned about what we were going to talk about this week, David. We had last week off, mainly because I went to a meat raffle the day before and I didn't have a voice. The next day, my voice is still kind of giving out on me. Every now and then, occasionally is the word that I'm looking for there. The voice
Okay.
is still
Real quick, what is a meat raffle? Is it what
I
it sounds
forget.
like?
It's exactly what it sounds like. I forget you're not from Buffalo. So what a meat raffle is already going to be a long podcast. But it's going to be even longer now. The meat raffle is the greatest creation of all time. I don't know who created it. Maybe it was God himself. Maybe it was a divine divine intervention to give us the meat raffle. But so what the meat raffle is there's some guy, meat raffle. I forget that this is a Buffalo thing. This is wild to me. So the meat raffle, there's a guy. Both times I've went, it's been a tall white man in an ill-fitting, grease-stained T-shirt. And so what this guy does is he goes to these venues. It's a different guy, but I like to imagine that it's one guy. He brings his meats to these venues, and then he raffles them off. Before each round, he says, "I have these meats, and it costs this much money for a ticket." And then you buy as many tickets as you want, and then he spins a wheel. And then I love how I need to do the action of spinning a wheel so that people know what I'm talking about. But so he spins a wheel, and then he yells off the number, and then the people go crazy if their number that was on their ticket. It's a raffle. It's a raffle, and both
interesting.
I live east of Buffalo and have never heard of a meat raffle. It's more of like, I think it's come on in recent years. I do think it's a relatively new trend. But both meat raffles I've been to two now. I've been very successful at both meat raffles. I don't want to brag, but I'm being called the Michael Jordan of raffling meats. So you go to these meat raffles. Both times I've been there, I've gotten, I don't want to say free beer, but it's included in the cost of your ticket.
Right.
So it was a $7 ticket last time. I drank maybe 7 pitchers of beer.
Wow.
Not my table, me. Kyle. So that's why my voice was.
That's why you were MIA last week.
Exactly, because I had a hell of a time at the meat raffle. Nobody follows me on Instagram. If anyone tried to, I would deny it. But I made crew necks for my friend and I. They were just maroon crew necks, and they said meat. And every time we won meat, we would just chant meat. And it was incredible. Someone's raffling meat. Yeah, go to meat raffle. Exactly. I am being called the greatest of all time when it comes to meat raffles. So it was a great time. So now that the meat raffle's out of the way, today we're going to be talking about the state of the Buffalo Bills. And much like, actually, no, this is going to be better than the normal state of the union because it will probably go on too long, but you're not going to be bored by this one. You're going to watch it the whole way through, and you're going to enjoy it because we have some great conversations here that we are going to get into momentarily. We're going to look at the Bills' salary cap situation, current long-term stuff like that, how that will impact the draft strategy. We're also going to be looking at the current roster holes, how that impacts the draft strategy. Basically, it's self-explanatory. It's much like the meat raffle. We're going to look at the state of the Buffalo Bills and determine how the current state impacts the draft strategy. So, before we get into that, David, how are you? What's going on?
I'm doing great, Kyle. Came from a work function that included all the free food I could possibly want. And it was all homemade, and it was delicious, as someone might be able to tell now. So it was good. Doing pretty good. We're what now? Like almost 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks from the draft, and we'll be that much closer to finally being done with talking about the same crap over and over again. So I'm looking forward to that too.
I am excited. I am excited to get some new talking points, and I'm excited to be done with mock drafts. We did a mock draft 2 weeks ago, David, and I was excited to see the to
Good.
see the feedback for that mock draft. But we were still on.
There were quite some reactions to that. I think my favorite was probably the guy who commented first after the recording went up, who basically just said, "This is the worst mock draft I've ever seen." No,
Mhm,
really, and went into like a pretty detailed comment that was
mhm.
also pretty nonsensical, all things considered. No offense to whoever that was. I mean, actually, no. Let me take that back. Total offense to whoever that was that commented that, because that was a little ridiculous. But thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Well, my favorite part of that was that I was waiting for the recording to download while he commented that. And so while I was waiting for the audio to download, he edited the comment like 6 times just to try to grammatically correct it. And I'm just watching him edit his own comment here about how our mock draft sucks. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done with these comments. This is
Wow,
incredible. But so
that's impressive.
we're
I
not
love
doing a
that.
mock draft here today, but we will be talking about the draft again. Um, I think we're going to have some interesting discussions today here, David, because Jordan Poyer, there's some Jordan Poyer stuff going on. We'll talk about that.
Mhm.
This is going to be I may just end up titling this episode the Tremaine Edmonds episode, because I do feel like when you're talking about the Bills' salary cap situation and how it impacts the draft strategy potentially, Tremaine Edmonds is the name that comes to my mind as a guy who you really have to talk about. So let's just get right into it here with the salary cap situation. The Bills currently have $8.25 million in available cap space, according to Spotrac. That, of course, they just freed up some money. I think they had less than that like a week ago at this
They
time, but
did.
not
I think they
right.
were over by like a couple 100,000, and then the Diggs
The
extension freed
Stephon
up.
Diggs contract
Yeah.
happens. 4 years, up to $104 million for one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I did see some sentiment that it's an overpay, which I laughed at. I was like,
Okay, I'm sorry. Have we not watched the same receiver for the last 2 years? Overpay. It's like I'm sorry. What did Tyreek Hill just get? What
yeah,
did Devontae Adams just get? Like, what are we talking about here?
some dude just, I don't even know who it was, but some dude tweeted something along the lines of like, trading Diggs for Jefferson and then giving Diggs all that money has to be the worst trade in NFL history. And it's like, what do you think Justin Jefferson's gonna get? What kind of money do you think
Right.
he's gonna get? Maybe
Bobby Hart playing court. Now, we're not saying this is what the Bills are doing. People are saying it. We are not
it's a
saying it.
rumor. Yeah, it's a rumor
It's
that
a
I've heard
rumor.
for sure.
It's a rumor.
The chat is going crazy about Bobby Hart. What?
And
Guys, I tried to forget
I
about this.
cannot think of a player that generates as much just aggressive volatility as Bobby Hart does. And like I get it. He's not a good player. He's a very bad NFL player. But like we don't need to talk about it any more than that. He's a bad player. Whatever.
My favorite part, David, as we said before we went on, my favorite part is that this signing happened on April 11th. Like they were they
Right.
got a camp body in April. They were that afraid that someone else was going to ask for the services of Bobby Hart.
Man.
That's as much Bobby Hart talk as we have today. And then as Jessica writes, yeah, Diggs' new money doesn't even start until 2024. Yeah, again,
Mhm.
it's a contract for sure. And Diggs is signed presumably through the rest of his career. He has stated that he wants to retire
Yeah.
a Bill. I think I think there was mutual interest in Stephon Diggs retiring a
Right.
Buffalo Bill. It's great. I guess it had
It's
it.
it's very cool that somebody as as talented and also just as cool and kind of just badass as Stefan Diggs is like, yeah, like I like being here and I want to retire here. I want to retire as a Buffalo Bill. Like this place feels like it's so cool. It's really cool. And like especially when he got traded and obviously like all of us Bills fans were like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome! Like this is exactly what they needed. This is incredible." And so many Vikings fans are like, "Good luck, guys," because
Mhm.
and then everybody else in the NFL was like, "He's good if he thinks having Kirk Cousins as his quarterback is bad. Wait until he gets Josh Allen, because I was like right before.
Wait until
right, and like even then, that was kind of a weird like narrative to put out there, because like Diggs' whole issue, or one of the biggest issues they had, was just that Kirk Cousins wouldn't throw him the ball. And like that was never an issue with Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen is going to give his dudes chances. Like it doesn't
right.
like if anything, he's
open,
maybe
catch
a
the
little
ball.
too like chancy with giving his guys that opportunity. But it's like when you have Stephon Diggs, like of course you're gonna give him all those chances. You know, that's what you're supposed to do. So it's one of those that trade and how that ended up playing out for the Vikings and picking Justin Jefferson to essentially replace him, that's probably going to go down as one of the greatest NFL trades of all time. Not because one team got fleeced. This is not like a Jerry Hughes for Kelvin Shepard swap. Thank you for that, Doug Whaley. God bless up.
Doug Whaley said they can't pay Diggs, can't do it. They don't have the money for it.
Doug just he wasn't privy to that information.
Oh,
he wasn't privy to that.
Ruh-roh.
So, but you know, it's just like to be able to give up. Well, it was like what, a first, a fourth, and a sixth for Diggs, right? If I'm remembering that correctly, something like that. And then they get Justin Jefferson. I mean, it's about as good a trade as the NFL has ever seen. It's just like exactly what both of these teams wanted. And it's very rare for something like that to happen. And kudos to both the Bills and the Vikings for actually being good teams in that regard.
Right, good organizations. Can you believe it? But no, Diggs, yes, like we said, signed through 2026 now, I do believe. Should be here for the opening of the new stadium. That's how I'm trying to time out contracts at this point. Wait, John Harry,
can we get more Doug Whaley comments?
Can Doug Whaley please say there's no way we will sign a vet corner? Can Doug Whaley please say that the Bills will not acquire Laviska Shenault? Please, can we get him saying that? Can I get him on the show now to say that? But no.
Doug Whaley, by the way, finalist for the Pittsburgh Steelers general manager job.
He has a lot of great history in Pittsburgh. Did a lot of great things for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like communicative, is that a word?
Communications, is that what you're thinking?
He did some great stuff with emails, I think, when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Did some interesting things. Diggs is here until 2028, Jessica writes. Hey, he'll be here for the new stadium, definitely. That's right. You do love to see it. So but yes, about the salary cap situation in general, Bills currently have $8.25 million in salary cap space. And then looking at just the situation larger, or more largely, we will get into it more specifically here in a few minutes, or just, with the rest of our topics here. But I would describe it, to quote Chernobyl, not great, not terrible. Like it's not great, but it's also like,
Chernobyl? Is that the metaphor we're going with?
It's the television program, the HBO miniseries, of course. Not great, not terrible. It's not. There's a lot of things that Chernobyl could have been interpreted there as, but we're going with the television show. Not great, not terrible. It's a quote. But okay, so yes, the Bills currently have $8.25 million in salary cap space, as I've said 5 times now. Players entering the final year of their deal include, and again, we'll talk about these guys individually soon, Jordan Poyer, Tremaine Edmonds, Dawson Knox, Devin Singletary. Those are the marquee names. And then everyone who signed a 1-year deal this year. Of course, Jordan Phillips, Shaq Lawson, Rodger Saffold, Jamison Crowder, whatever. And then you also have to consider, when looking at the salary cap situation, guys who aren't on expiring deals, but will need new deals probably sooner rather than later, or at least extension eligible and should be extension candidates sooner rather than later. Those being Ed Oliver, Gabriel Davis, Micah Hyde maybe needs a new deal. So I think it's funny that the week Jordan Poyer is in the news because he wants a new contract, we're like, I bring up Micah Hyde as an extension candidate. But no, we'll talk about that. But then just looking more largely at the salary cap situation in the future. Right now, the Bills are slated to have $2 million in salary.
Good for you, why? Good for you, why? Putting yourself out there like that. Appreciate the honesty.
That is good. That is big. Good on you, Y. So the Bills are currently slated to have $2 million in salary cap space next year, available salary cap space, according to Spotrac. But that is with a $218 million salary cap. I don't know about you, David, but that seems a bit conservative to me. I've seen some estimates place it anywhere from 220 to 225 million. So the cap is expected to reach pre-pandemic levels. I think in 2023, so or pre-pandemic expectations. So 218 seems a bit low. So I expect, just naturally them to have more than $2 million in available salary cap space. And then Greg Thompson, who was watching, he was here for meat raffle discussion. I don't know if he's still here though, but he tweeted and put on Instagram just how the Bills can easily free up $40 million in salary cap space without making a single cut, just by restructuring Josh Allen, Von Miller, Deion Dawkins, and Trey White. They free up $42 million in salary cap space like that. So with, knowing how they can restructure, or, the dudes who they can restructure, and not knowing how much the salary cap is going to go up by, but, knowing that it will go up, one can reasonably expect the Bills to generate as much as $40 to $50 million in salary cap space for next season. So that's good. That's a good chunk of change to have. But when you consider the guys who are expiring, Jordan Poyer, Tremaine Edmunds, Dawson Knox, Oliver extension, Gabe Davis extension, assuming that he has the year that we're all expecting him to have, you can't pay everybody. And I don't think $40 to $50 million is enough to pay everybody. Now, this is obviously something that we've been expecting for a long time. I mean, it's something that we've been bracing for a long time, but we really haven't had to encounter. They've been signing everyone, which makes sense because Bean has stated, draft and develop your own and then pay your own. Yeah. But also, I mean, I do not see, other than the explanation of Bean is a magician, which thus far has been a real explanation, but I don't see how they get Edmunds, Knox, Poyer, Oliver. I don't see how all of them get paid in Buffalo. So what we're going to do now is look at these players, determine which of them should get paid, who should potentially be the odd man out, and how this impacts draft strategy. So, David, I'll start with Poyer. Let's just start here with the guy who's in the news. Currently has a $10.7 million salary cap hit, but he's only going to make $7.1 million in yearly cash this year. Only $7.1 million. That's still a good chunk of change, but he's not paid like a top 10 safety. And he is a top 10 safety. He currently has the sixth highest cap hit among safeties in the NFL going into the season, but he's 23rd among safeties in yearly cash. So this is why he wants a new deal. I think he rightfully so does want a new deal. So David, just Jordan Poyer, thoughts on a potential extension. Does he factor in here?
Yeah, you don't hire Drew Rosenhaus because you're happy with your contract. Drew Rosenhaus is just, he's the man you go to when you want money. And he's gotten a lot of people a lot of money. So I mean, Poyer is somebody who he absolutely deserves to be paid more than he's being paid. The fact that the Bills have been able to get the type of consistent production out of him ever since he's come to Buffalo for the money that they've been paying him is kind of crazy and ridiculous. It's tricky largely because unless you are young, coming off your rookie deal, and arguably top 5 at your position, the NFL does not care about safeties. Like that's not me saying that. That's the NFL saying that. The NFL does not care about safeties. They just don't. Like Marcus Williams, who because the Saints couldn't afford to pay him a big contract, ended up going to the Ravens on, what was it, like a 5-year, $70 million deal or something like that. Huge deal. Good for him because he's totally worth all of that and more, honestly. But I mean, that was who else in the safety market gets paid like that? Like there's not that type of money in the safety market. And with Poyer being 30 years old, right? Am I remembering this correctly?
He's 30. He turns 31. I actually wrote it down because I'm smart. Turns 31 this month.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he is somebody that I think will age well given the way that he plays, because he is in this system and he is a perfect fit for what they do, and he's just very smart and has really good fundamentals. But outside of this system, I don't know, like, where else. Let me be clear. He can be successful other places. I'm not saying that Jordan Poyer is like a complete and total product of Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier's defensive scheme. However, as we've talked about before on this podcast, scheme matters. Where you end up matters. Fit matters. We talk about this with rookie players. We talk about this with free agents. I mean, it matters, and I don't know specifically where, like, there's no like immediate like connection to me where, like, oh, if he goes to this team, he will replicate the same sort of success that he had in Buffalo. You know what I mean? I'm sure that he could for some other team. Maybe I just don't know what that team is because I haven't necessarily given it a ton of thought. But again, it's just like I don't know exactly what the end game here is for him. I mean, I understand wanting a new contract because he should get a new contract. But what is that number actually going to look like? Because if he wants like top 5 safety money, I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a big jump in his salary, and that's tricky. And it's tricky to figure out. And it's like, how long is that? How long do you make that extension for? How long? How much funny money is actually involved here? It's tricky. It's very tricky, and he definitely puts the Bills in a tricky spot. And I think he knows that, and I think Drew Rosenhaus knows that as well. And especially because if he gets paid a different contract, I mean, like you said, Micah Hyde, he's going to want a new contract too, because again, the Bills have been paying him a pretty cheap contract.
They have relatively similar deals.
Yeah, like, this is the best safety duo in the NFL, and they have been paid moderately well, but not close to what they should be paid realistically. Like, the amount of production that these two guys have had ever since they've come to this team is genuinely crazy. And for them to be consistent, I mean, defensive back play is so hard to be consistent at. It's so hard. From game to game, year to year, it is so difficult being a very good defensive back in the NFL. The fact that these two guys have been just at such a high level ever since 2017 is crazy. And they deserve to be paid more than they are right now. I don't know if that actually will happen. And because of that, like you said, it changes things when you look at the draft strategy for this team, because now you're looking away from, like, get another weapon for Josh Allen and looking more towards, hey, after this year, what is our defensive backfield going to look like? Because that could change real quick. And, like we've said before, Sean McDermott knows how to coach up defensive backs, even guys that are cast-offs or whatever. I mean, that's sort of how they got where they are now with Hyde and Poyer. I mean, Hyde was just sort of this utility guy that they used in the slot a bunch in Green Bay. And then the Bills were like, hey, want to be our free safety and just be one of the best free safeties in the NFL? And Poyer was like a converted corner who, like, was okay in Cleveland in his last year. And then they like, hey, you want to be our strong safety and kind of roam around the whole field, go to sideline, like right near the line of scrimmage and stuff. And they're like, all right. And it just worked. So even though I have a firm and strong belief in Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott to get the most out of defensive backs, as I have said before, these are still two really, really good players, and it's hard to replace those guys. And to do that, I think you would either have to get really, really cheap in free agency with those guys, or you look into the draft and you hope that you can just get a lot out of guys when they're on their rookie contracts. So there you go. I've pontificated enough. You're up, Kyle.
No, I just think again, how this relates to draft strategy, I would not be surprised if safety is a position that they take a lot of safeties, right? They take a lot of special teamers regardless. They take a safety,
Yeah.
I feel like, most years. But I do feel like there is a little bit of emphasis placed on the safety position this year. Contract situations removed. Poyer's 31. Hyde's around that age as well. They are not getting any younger. So just the idea of a developmental safety who can learn from these guys for a couple of years before taking over ultimately, because again, who knows how, I mean, Poyer, I think Aaron put out a tweet this week. I don't know if it was Aaron, but it was somebody just about how comparatively Jordan Poyer's tread isn't that bad. Like you look at snap count compared to age and it's lower than you'd expect. So because he had a lot of injury issues in Cleveland as well.
Yeah.
So Poyer, I do think safety is a position they will take, but I don't necessarily, obviously, if they can't get a Poyer deal done, or if they don't want to get a Poyer deal done, I think safety shoots up the draft board in terms of need. But I think they get a Poyer deal done. I do. I think that having Hyde and Poyer allows that defense to do so much else just because they give up nothing over the top. Having Hyde and Poyer back there, I mean, there's nothing else that can be said about Hyde and Poyer other than they're the best safety duo in the league. They just rarely, if ever, do you see the Bills getting beat over the top. You see Josh Allen beating other teams over the top, and then it's just never replicated because they have Hyde and Poyer back there. Greg put out a good proposal. I think it was yesterday. His proposal was a 4-year, $52 million deal. That's what it can be announced as, at least, with $45 million in new money, with manageable cap hits in 2022 and 2023. And then, you can get out of it after that. Now, obviously, you don't want Jordan Poyer to come out and say, I want to retire as a Bill, and then you structure the deal in such a way that you can get out of it in 2 years. Like, that's kind of shady behavior. But I mean, that's a good deal for the team, right? You can still take a safety or, in day 2 or day 3, or you can continue to develop DeMar Hamlin while still having Jordan Poyer under contract at a manageable number for a year or two. I think that is best case scenario here. So how does Jordan Poyer entering the final year of his deal impact draft strategy? I don't think it impacts it that much. I think they were probably going to take a safety anyway. Maybe you get one a round earlier than you thought you'd get one, but I don't think, the Jordan Poyer contract drama makes safety a realistic round 1 projection.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting like this needs to be a discussion for pick 25 or anything like that, because that's rich for like what we expect pick 25 to be is somebody that is going to contribute this year. So I think you don't necessarily need to look at safety for that, but I do think you look maybe if there's somebody like really high on their board that's there on day 2, I think that's potentially an option for them. So I'm interested in that. So we have a super chat shout out to Ned Ryerson, who is the true leader of the Bills safety tandem. If you had to replace one of them, which one would it be? It's a good question because like they've both been captains for the team before.
If you ask me in 2018, 2019, who's the leader of that tandem, I would have said Hyde any day of the week. I think, and I thought Hyde was the better player as well. But now, I don't know. You see the videos of Jordan Poyer hyping up the secondary and the defense in general before each game, talk shit, hit or whatever, whatever his gimmick is. I mean, it's a good gimmick, but like it's tough. If I had to replace one, I think I just prefer Hyde. I think I just like Hyde more as a player than I like Jordan Poyer. But that being said, I really like both of them. But Ned has asked, so I have to answer. Poyer would be easier to replace, probably, but it's still difficult. It's not like an easy thing to replace Jordan Poyer.
Part of me wants to say Hyde because he was the one who shit on what's his name during that press conference after the first Patriots game.
Oh, Jerry Sullivan.
Jerry Sullivan. That's right.
They both did though, and they're great at that.
Poyer was kind of just like flabbergasted and didn't really say a whole lot, but like Hyde was just like, "What are you talking about?" And then like when he left, he was like calling him out directly, and it was pretty good. So I don't know, maybe Hyde just because of that.
Well, like, and that's another thing, but just like, and this is maybe why my perception has shifted a bit. Like, you look back at 2017, 2018, 2019, Hyde was the dude who reporters went to in the locker room. Like, he consistently spoke on behalf of the defense, on behalf of the team. Poyer did as well, but not as much as Hyde did. So maybe that's why I pictured Hyde to be more of the leader. But I do think they both have leadership capabilities, leadership qualities. I think I just prefer Hyde. So to wrap up Poyer talk, I would give him a deal. To me, it doesn't really impact draft strategy because I think he should be extended for at least, I like the Greg proposal. I don't know if Poyer will like it, but I like the Greg proposal quite a bit. Now, you thought this was controversial, or you thought the last one was controversial. We're moving on to Tremaine Edmonds. Now, Tremaine Edmonds, I typically about Tremaine Edmonds, I just, I'm a centrist, a dirty centrist. I'm like, regardless of how you feel about it or when talking about drafting a linebacker, I say, regardless of how you feel about him as a player, he's on an expiring deal. So we have to talk about, potentially getting another linebacker. But now, given how I've structured this show, I put myself in this position. We do have to talk about Tremaine Edmonds as a player a little bit. According to Spotrac, he has a market value of $13.8 million. As of now, you compare that to other inside linebacker contracts or middle linebacker contracts, who would be the sixth highest paid inside backer in the NFL. Is Tremaine Edmonds the sixth best inside linebacker in the NFL?
No. And I like Tremaine Edmonds. I think he gets he gets too much hate. He is overhated, let's be honest. But I do think, this was sort of something that has kind of become a slow realization throughout this offseason and how much they've been spending on players. And it's just like, man, I understand the old there's more money in the banana stand. There's always money in the banana stand, but there's only so much money that the banana stand has. And I just we keep waiting for an Edmonds breakout. And maybe that happens this year, but I don't know if that's the case. Even if it's not, I think he's still worth like a second contract, obviously. I just don't know if the second contract is what he wants it to be. Because, being the, 16th overall pick and being a former Pro Bowl player, obviously that gets you some more notoriety that you can use in contract negotiations. But, like what's a fair deal for Tremaine Edmonds? What would that even look like? Like, I'm honestly not entirely sure what that would look like at this point. And if there were rumors sometime last month, I think, about like the Bills were shopping Tremaine Edmonds around, or
there was a rumor that they were shopping a veteran, and people were like, Edmonds,
and like maybe they kind of let his agent like inquire to other teams, like, hey, if Tremaine was available, you got to pay him either this year or next year. So, what would you guys look to give up? They probably told him, like, listen, we're fine with giving up a pick, but like we would also have to pay him, so that pick's going to be pretty low, and no team's going to give up Tremaine Edmonds for a lower pick, and we don't want to pay him and also give up a high pick. And this is what we would pay him right now based on what he's done. And it's just like, I don't know. This is a very strange, sort of mysterious. I don't really know what to make of this situation right now. And the best thing in terms of clarity would be if he just has a great, legitimate breakout type of season and establishes himself as a top 5 linebacker, then I feel fine about paying him like a top 5 linebacker.
Right, exactly.
But if he's just kind of what he has been the last couple of years, which is like he's good in these areas, but he really, really struggles in some of these areas, and there's not enough like in between sort of stuff to really make you feel great. And I don't know, it just it doesn't it just doesn't make a lot of sense right now. I don't really know what to make of it. And the other thing is, like, you look at Matt Milano, obviously, who, I mean, makes a lot of splash plays. He also makes a lot of the same mistakes that Edmonds does, whether people kind of realize it or not. Like he does, but the other part of that is that Milano is a converted safety who's like 6'1" and 200 and like maybe 230 pounds. So, but Milano was also not paid like a top end linebacker. I mean, I don't necessarily have it right in front of me, but we can look it up to see
It's a manageable
exactly
deal
how
for
much
sure.
he was being paid. Right. I mean, I remember when he was a impending free agent. I was like, all right, they're not going to be able to bring it back because some team is going to just pay out the wazoo to get Matt Milano. And then they ended up bringing him back, and it wasn't for like a crazy contract, and I was pretty surprised by that. But I mean, overall, I don't really know what to make of that in comparison to Tremaine Edmonds, and it's just what do you do? What do you do? I don't. It's very
difficult. It's a difficult conversation because, like you said, I think the trade talk is silly. I don't think the Bills should trade Tremaine Edmonds. I think you look at this roster. I mean, it's very obvious they have Super Bowl ambitions. I'm not comfortable going in to the regular season with a either rookie or a free agent that you would sign at this time of year. I'm not interested in either of them playing significant 100% of the snaps at linebacker.
Tremaine Edmonds should be on this team in 2022.
Right, and I think he will be.
Yeah.
But beyond 2022 it's interesting because, again, like you said, if he comes out and is a top 5 linebacker in the NFL, obviously, always money in the banana stand. Figure it out. I'm sure Bean will find a way because, again, that was, you look back at draft night, he got Allen and Edmonds on the same night. That would just be a fairy tale ending to that story. He's able to draft, develop, and sign both of them. That's his motto that he just lived up to. It would be great. But you look at, again, the salary cap space that they're going to have, let's say aggressively between $40 and $50 million with guys like Poyer, maybe to sign Knox, maybe an Oliver extension, etc. We'll get into that. But you look at Edmonds and you look at who he's going to be at that point. At the very least, this is what Tremaine Edmonds is going to be when he hits the market. A 24-year-old middle linebacker with 5 years of starting NFL experience, and at the very least, 2 Pro Bowl appearances.
Yeah.
Some team, I mean, we said that about Milano, but I would be shocked if some team does not give Edmonds just a silly deal that the Bills either physically cannot match or would be very uncomfortable matching. Yeah. I just don't think, and that's why with Edmonds, I'm kind of leaning towards this being his last season here, just because I don't think the Bills are going to have the financial capital to be able to keep him long term. I think that some team is just going to come along and offer him a ridiculous contract that he would be silly not to take.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that in general, just because it's really, really hard to make sense of just what a contract would even look like for him. And when you're already strapped against the cap moving forward for the next couple of years because you're trying to make a Super Bowl run, I don't know where that money comes from. And I mean, obviously it can come from a whole bunch of other restructures and whatnot, but like there's also just like, hey, I mean, are we really going to restructure 3 other players' contracts and push that money down the road just to sign Tremaine Edmonds? I mean, And then, I mean, do you think about the opportunity cost of that? It's like, do we push these contracts down the road so that we can sign Tremaine Edmonds and then not do anything else because we can't afford to do anything else in free agency? Or
Right.
do we, look at another replacement for Edmonds plus some other like corners or whatever it might be next year? It's tough decisions. And
Right.
it's just, I don't know what that'll actually look like. I mean, it's so tricky, and it's I don't know. It's very difficult. I don't know how people actually do this as their job professionally and make these decisions and feel comfortable about it. But man,
Right.
it's a very tough thing.
There are certain players that you can look at and say they would help my team. I will sign them to a deal that could potentially handicap me financially moving forward. Like some people would argue the Von Miller deal will handicap the
Right.
Bills moving forward financially. I don't think it will, but some people could argue that. Edmonds to me is not a player that I would be willing to take that risk on. I've seen a lot from Tremaine Edmonds. I just haven't seen enough consistently. I just don't.
And that's always the thing with when talking about Edmonds, right? It's like there needs to be a certain level of consistency that's not there at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was sort of the risk that they took when they drafted him, right? I mean, he was 19 years old. He only had so much experience in college. He was this great athlete. You take a chance on those types of guys. That's how you end up with someone like Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you end up with somebody like Tremaine Edmonds, who like has progressed as a player in the NFL, has certainly grown as a player in the NFL. But I mean, after a certain point, you just got to call a spade. And he is not quite the player that you need him to be in order to justify a big contract for him. And actually, as Brian here says, linebacker, safety is not premium positions. Sure. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say the linebacker is something you like have to take, at a major spot every year, but I do think it's not quite as easy as just go draft another Tremaine Edmonds or whatever. Like a couple, like what was it last year when Fred Warner got his big contract extension,
Mm-hmm.
and there was that one dude, what was his name? Josh Hirschmeyer or whatever it is, who was like, "Oh, this is a terrible deal. Like, why would you do this? Like, why would you pay a linebacker this much money? Like, it's just go draft Fred Warner again." It's like, okay, you don't understand how that works.
Why doesn't every team just have a Fred Warner? Oh, damn. Why didn't I think of that?
You don't get to just draft Fred Warner in the third round every year. Fred Warner in the third round does not always happen every year. That was like ridiculous conversation.
Go get another one. Easy.
Right? Just draft another one. It's super easy, guys. Super.
But
it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, moving on.
As Vlad writes, linebacker is an important position in the McDermott defense. Yeah, it is, especially with how much nickel they play. You're only playing with two linebackers, and you have, you need the rangy sideline to sideline guys.
Yeah, and we've talked about that here too. I mean, we talked about that sort of in relation to like the interior defensive line. Like if you're gonna lose a certain amount of size at the second level, you have to find that replacement of size somewhere else. And they did manage to do that in free agency, where they signed Daquan Jones, and that was that's such an important signing to me. But it also makes it puts a lot of pressure on your linebackers, and this defense does put a lot of pressure on their linebackers. It asks a lot of Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, and it's going to ask a lot of whoever may or may not come in to replace Tremaine Edmonds.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not totally convinced that somebody is going to be that much better than Tremaine Edmonds, the way that maybe some fans perceive that to be,
Oh, I agree. I you can certainly downgrade from Tremaine Edmonds.
Yes.
You can upgrade. Yeah. You can certainly downgrade.
Yeah.
And given the financial, again, I'm not banging the table in favor of moving on from Tremaine Edmonds, but given the financial situation they're going to be in, I think resetting the financial clock at that linebacker spot does make the most sense, which brings us to the question. How does the Edmonds contract situation impact draft strategy? How early is linebacker in play?
You know, I'm not totally sure because there's part of me that wants to say like you could go round 1 here.
You could.
With this.
You could.
And I don't think that's crazy. But again, once you make that decision, it really almost feels like you're signaling to the rest of the league like Tremaine Edmonds is on the market if y'all want him.
Right. It might be a year too early, but
right. That's the thing. And like there are legitimate linebackers in this class that could be really, really good for this team. But I also think that if you're taking somebody at 25 overall, you gotta get somebody that's going to contribute this year. I don't know if that's going to be the case with a linebacker that they draft this year. With that said, if there's somebody sort of like what we talked about with safety, if there's someone super high on their board, like let's say, I don't know, Nakobe Dean or Christian Harris from Alabama, if one of those guys falls for some reason and it's the second round and you're not really in love with anyone else on the board, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that all day long. I think a lot of other teams would too, but I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. So to me, I think day 2 is when you start looking at linebackers. We got a super chat. Shout out to Ed. Oh boy.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Edward Polish last name. Kowalczyk.
There we go. Arrington from Notre Dame, I'm guessing, built like a linebacker and high football IQ. So actually what we could do is since that's not really a name I've really looked at before, for those that don't know, we're gonna plug one particular group. Hamilton.
Kyle Hamilton.
Oh, Kyle Hamilton. Okay, that makes sense. That makes more sense. Never mind. I don't need to plug anything.
It's not gonna happen.
That's not gonna happen.
But not be in position, but that's a fun idea.
I appreciate the chutzpah in trying to get Kyle Hamilton to this team.
Let's start the narrative. Let's just do it. What are we saying about Kyle Hamilton?
We're hearing from
who didn't go to his birthday party. Is the Kobe Dean in play?
League sources are saying Kyle Hamilton to Buffalo.
Nakobe Dean is an interesting discussion given what came out. I think it was today, maybe yesterday, but I think it was today about he has a lingering meniscus issue. And I think Russell Brown, Cover One draft expert, tweeted something like, I would not be surprised if a team still grabs him at the end of round 1, which again, you show your hand. You show your hand if you draft Nakobe Dean. You're like, okay, we're going to figure out whatever his medical issue is. We're going to develop him for a year, and then in 2 years, it's Edmonds or not Edmonds. Sorry, opposite of that. It's Milano and Dean. Edmonds is gone. But for that reason, look, unless someone falls into their lap, unless a Nakobe Dean or a Devin Lloyd falls into their lap, I do not see them taking a linebacker in round 1. Yeah. Round 2, round 3, maybe in extreme circumstances, like you said, David, if someone who's really high on their board falls to them and it's undeniable that they take a guy that high, yes. Otherwise, round 3 at the earliest, I think.
Yeah. We had a interesting comment somewhere in here. Okay, yeah. So let's talk about this real quick. So I must be old school here, but I never heard of a defense playing with 2 linebackers. No wonder they were getting Burr over the bill in the KC game. Okay, so real quick, we're gonna learn a little football here.
We're gonna learn today.
So in something that has been trending in the NFL, has been obviously a lot of nickel and a lot of dime. So nickel is where you take one linebacker off and you put it on an extra defensive back. A lot of teams are doing this, and the Bills in particular are very, very high in doing this. So we're going to look at something here. This is from Sports Info Solutions. This is their public-facing website, nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. They have team pages that show a whole bunch of stuff here. It's really interesting information if you guys want to visit it. It is free. Not everything from SIS is. This is a great resource for leading up to the draft. And our very own Kendall Mursky has contributed to some of their draft reports. I've contributed to draft reports for SIS before. I've worked for SIS before. They're a great group.
Shout out to David.
So right here is a really interesting number. Okay. For those that can't see, is there a way we can make this a little bit bigger? Okay. That's as good as we're going to get.
That was good.
So
really good.
Right here. So nickel defense, 2 linebackers, 5 DBs. The Bills play it 91% of the time. That is first in the NFL. They get minus 0.18 EPA per play, which is first in the NFL. They are the highest percentage nickel defense in terms of playing nickel defense, and they are also the best nickel defense in the NFL. And that's a big shout out to Teron Johnson for being able to do what he does. And they also ask a lot of him as well, because he's just so good at run defense, especially for being like 5'8", 185. He's
around there,
yeah. So that's just sort of why that is what it is. That was not to dunk on David Pizzamenti. It's a fair question to ask. It's a learning experience. We appreciate questions like that. And I appreciate that I was ready with an actual answer to explain that. That don't never be afraid to ask a question like that. It is worth asking questions like that. We may not always have the answer, but if we don't, someone like Eric or Kendall or Anthony probably does. So never be afraid to ask questions like that. That's why we're here.
John writes, the real question is, would you want to play a rookie at middle linebacker when we are trying to win a chip? No, I wouldn't,
but like if they're good, like and that's of course that's real easy to say, right? Oh, if the rookie linebacker's here, we should just play the rookie linebacker. Duh. But that's not always the case.
I think we were a bit more definitive on Edmonds than we were on Poyer, because I think with Poyer we were just like, oh no, maybe we were definitive on both. Maybe we're doing actually really well. Pay Poyer, Edmonds at good this point, unless Edmonds has this breakout year in year 5, which I guess could happen, but unlikely. But if he does, then yeah, pay him. But otherwise, I think it's time to reset the clock there. Okay, Dawson Knox. Where does he factor into this long-term salary cap situation?
Realistically, because I did this as part of the salary cap extravaganza earlier this offseason. I looked at what a Dawson Knox extension would look like. It's more reasonable than you think, actually, because I think
contracts typically are, unless you have stupid teams. But
thank God Trent Baalke decided not to pay Evan Ingram like a 5-year, $80 million contract this offseason.
Thank you, Trent. And shockingly, he didn't. Shockingly.
Thank God. So Knox is, again, one of those players that was like really good athlete, super raw coming out of college, completely underutilized in a very stacked Ole Miss offense. And his first 2 years were kind of a struggle, just like trying to find some sort of consistency. He's found that consistency. That's for sure. He has absolutely found that consistency in the NFL this past year. He's just been really great. I think, like, realistically, you could give him like a top 10 tight end contract, like closer to 10 in that range. And I think that's sort of what you could get away with Dawson Knox. And for that kind of money, yeah, I'm totally into that. I am super high on Dawson Knox. I was so happy to see him have the type of season that we all knew he was totally capable of having. And just he seems like he's got a great relationship with Josh Allen. He's a great threat in the red zone, and I'm really intrigued by what else, whatever that next, I mean, if he could take another step forward this year, I would love to see that too. And the sort of underrated thing when we're talking about Dawson Knox, obviously he's a great receiver, can get you some yards after the catch, is really great. Even in jump ball situations like we saw in that Patriots game. He's a really good blocker in space. And like he was kind of like that coming out of college just because they threw so many short screens and whatnot at Ole Miss. But he's also just improved as a blocker closer to the line of scrimmage as well. And I imagine that'll take another step forward. I'm really just it's so great to see a player like him develop and continue to develop. And shout out again to Rob Boras, number one Rob Boras stan.
You really are.
I swear, I think I'm the only one that cares this much about Titans coach Rob Boras. Friend of the show, Rob Boras. Shout out.
Can you imagine?
If you ever want, I'm going to email him one day. I'm going to email him like, hey, we talk about you all the time.
Hey, Rob.
Can we get an interview?
Not even Mr. Boris, just Rob. You're on a first name base at this point.
Robbie, my man.
We have some conversations going on in chat here. Jason writes, this brings us back to the defensive side of the ball. David and Kyle, why wouldn't Buffalo elevate Gregory Rousseau to a linebacker since the front defensive line is bulked up already? I think Greg Rousseau does factor into that defensive line being stacked up front or bulked up front. I think he factors into that. I think they really like him and they like, they want him to develop. I mean, people are talking about Edmonds potentially benefiting off of Von Miller. We've talked about Ed Oliver benefiting off Von Miller. I think off the field, especially, they want Greg Rousseau to be a guy who really benefits from Von Miller. So I think they are comfortable developing him along as a defensive end. Also, referring to Greg Rousseau, I think he's a good athlete. I don't know if he's athletic enough. He's not a linebacker. That's not he is. It's not his position.
Just, right. And like, let's be honest here. Greg Rousseau, as we've talked about before, was the number one defensive end edge player in terms of stopping the run last year. In the entire NFL as a rookie, he was the best run stopping defensive end. And that was a PFF statistic. But like when you turn on the tape, you see a dude that plays the run like he's been doing it his entire life. Like he is so technically sound. He pursues from the backside super well. He plays with leverage. He keeps that outside hand free. He does all these things super well. I'm not moving that to linebacker for any reason at all. Like it really just doesn't make any sense. And if we're gonna look at some more evidence, and I'm gonna do this again, I can do.
You have receipts today.
I'm here for it. This is why they pay me the moderate to below average
big
dollars. So when you look at Greg Rousseau here, I mean, we're talking about total points saved. 33 total points saved last year, which is SIS's primary statistic when talking about different players. You know who's close to that? Freaking Von Miller with 37 total points saved last year. I mean, we're talking about somebody who is that type of player already just as a run defender. And now he gets to have Von Miller, one of the greatest pass rushers ever, to come in and show him how to rush the passer like a pro. Yeah, I'm here for all that. I'm not moving Gregory Rousseau at all. Well, the only place I'm moving Gregory Rousseau is closer to the quarterback.
But that being said, though, Jason, if you're referring to the idea of moving on from Edmonds and you lose that size in the middle of the defense, I'm not opposed to occasionally dropping Rousseau back into a passing lane just to try to confuse the defense or confuse the offense a little bit. Having whatever his wingspan is, just that in the middle of the field in a passing lane, that's difficult to maneuver around. But it's not a permanent thing by any means.
This is the solution here, right there. This is the Galaxy brain take we've been all waiting for.
That is Galaxy brain. I love it. Go
to hell, Charles.
But no, with Knox, we're back on Knox.
We're back on Knox. We got totally sidetracked. But Knox, like he teaches me is a very it's definitely an easy extension candidate.
Right,
Largely because Yeah, because he's not going to break the bank, and he fits so well in that offense. He's going to be, and I think he will get even more run in this particular offense with more 12 personnel and a higher emphasis on the tight end position. I think you're going to see even more from Dawson Knox this year, and I'm very, very excited about that. So yeah.
Not going to break the bank. I do think Dawson Knox. How does it impact draft decisions? Maybe they draft a tight end on day 3 if they like a developmental guy to develop behind OJ Howard for a year, because Tommy Sweeney unfortunately is not it. But
yeah, I mean OJ Howard, that was a great pickup on the same day of Von Miller getting signed. He's also on a 1-year deal, and if he plays well, he's going to go somewhere else just because somewhere else is going to offer him way more money. So I would think that tight end is a position, a day 3 sort of position where it's like, hey, we really like this guy, let's go get him. I know that Eric has been looking at, what was it, Charlie Kolar from Iowa State. I from what I've seen, he's probably going to be available on day 3. So I'd be into that. I know Jelani Woods has been a guy that a lot of people talk about as like a day 3 guy because of his high athleticism.
Some dumb team will take him before.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like,
3, I don't think
like the weird thing is, if you watch Jelani Woods at all, like he's a pretty good athlete, but his test scores sort of seem like that's not quite what I'm seeing on the field. And like, why am I not seeing that on the field? If you are this great athlete, why isn't that showing up as much? So that's sort of what I'm concerned with Jelani Woods. I think Jelani Woods is like a fine prospect, but he will probably get overdrafted and as such kind of overhyped and have too high expectations for whatever team ends up making that mistake.
Devin Singletary is the running back conversation. He's a pending free agent. Look, I do not expect Devin Singletary to be on this team in 2 years. I think he might start week 1, but I think he's going to be part of a committee regardless of what the Bills do in the draft. And I do not think the Bills will be paying him. He's not going to command a huge contract because he's a fine running back. But I mean, if he does have a big year, that's another reason. That's especially he won't be back in 2 years because some team will pay him, a deal that the Bills will not be comfortable matching. So, Devin Singletary, I don't think impacts draft strategy at all, or his contract situation doesn't impact draft strategy. But I do think running back is in play relatively early. There's been some buzz regarding Breece Hall at 25. That's a bit rich for me. I love Breece Hall, but that's
we know that.
Given, I do think I do think there will be guys who can be more impactful available at 25, likely. But if Breece Hall falls to sometime in round 2, go for it. I mean, why not? I'm fine with Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, or really, I expect them to draft a running back. It's just a matter of who they like.
Yeah, and I really like. I mean, any of the top 3 guys kind of they do move the needle for me. I think Isaiah Spiller is probably a little too much like Devin Singletary to be like, hey, let's go take Isaiah Spiller in the 2nd round. You know what I mean? It's sort of like you don't need somebody to be Devin Singletary again. You just need like, if you're going to take a running back, you should take somebody who is either a little bit more complete than Singletary or is going to complement Singletary if you really want to keep him long term. With what we are probably expecting the Bills offense to look like with Aaron Kromer and Ken Dorsey, the run game will probably lean more towards zone, which is why I think, as John Herring puts, Kenneth Walker in a zone offense like this, it's exactly what you would want from him. I mean, when as a Michigan State Spartans fan, I had the pleasure and joy of watching Kenneth Walker this year, and it was fantastic. And I remember in one of those first few games, I was like, man, he reminds me so much of Raheem Mostert from the 49ers. And I think he's that type of player where, like, you can just give him that hole and he's just going to hit it and go. And he has that breakaway speed where he can just sprint past the 2nd and 3rd level guys. And his decisiveness, his vision, his ability to cut back, his ability to break tackles, it's all very, very impressive. The one real hesitation I have with Kenneth Walker is just that he was basically nothing when it came to passing situations. He wasn't a very good pass protector. He's not a great pass catcher. And it wasn't necessarily always just a case of like, well, he wasn't asked to do this. I mean, that's because sometimes that is the case when you're talking about an NFL draft prospect. It's like, we haven't seen him do this, this, and that. And it's like, well, like maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe he just can't do it, and the coaches knew better than to try and get him and put him in that position. But like, maybe it's just that a coach was stubborn, and it's like, we don't. That's not what we do with our running backs or our tight end or whatever. So they just don't ask them to do that. But with Kenneth Walker, it kind of just seemed like whenever he got a chance with the ball as a pass catcher, he didn't really do a ton with it. So that's my only hesitation with Kenneth Walker. But man, he is such a great fit for what I think the Bills are going to run offensively in their run game. And it would be very personally exciting to go from rooting for Kenneth Walker at Michigan State to rooting for Kenneth Walker in a Buffalo Bills uniform. I would be very happy about that in that regard. Again, in the second round, I think is when you need to start looking at running backs. I think first round, I would rather see a corner. I'd rather see a corner. Like, I'm really into corners at this point. Corner, maybe wide receiver if somebody like Chris Olave is there, which I know is incredibly ironic given that we traded back in our mock draft when Chris Olave was on.
We need to talk about this mock draft, okay? The chat. Breece Hall would be crazy in this offense. Breece Hall won't make it to 57. Hall in the second. Hall reminds me of Jonathan Taylor. Draft Breece Hall. Where Breece Hall in the second? Where were you guys for the mock draft when I banged the table for Breece Hall and the chat ridiculed me for drafting Breece Hall? The people were like, you're drafting a bust running back. What are you doing drafting a running back this early? And now, we got Breece Hall's actually good. I agree.
In between our mock draft and tonight, did Joe Marino say he liked Breece Hall in the second round?
Oh, boy. We're not. No. Oh, boy. David, you've opened up a can of worms. I'm trying to close that back up. Okay. So, yes, running back is in play in the second round. I certainly think running back is in play as early as the second round, maybe as early as the first. If like there's an extreme run on corners and no one worth taking in the first round is there, like even Woolen, right? That's his name.
Tariq Woolen.
Yeah, like even if he's gone, right, and you need to take a player and you don't want to trade the pick, I'm sure Breece Hall otherwise. I guess we'll just second round.
And there's plenty of corners in this draft where like even if they don't take one in the first, and like to me, the first round corners in this class are probably like Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, Trent McDuffie. You could probably sell me on Kyler Gordon, although I am not as big a fan as some other people are. Outside of that, I mean, I'm really not 100% sold on a lot of other guys. Once you get past, at least in terms of the first round, and because once you get into the second round, like, give me like a Rodger McCreary, because like I really like what I see from Rodger McCreary. I think he would be a great fit for this team. The other guy that's being talked about, and I almost forgot about, is Andrew Booth from Clemson, who, like, from what it sounds like, might actually be available for them at that range. And maybe if they have to, they could. I mean, we could obviously understand Brandon Beane trading up. He does it all the time. He likes trading up. That's what he does. I think he would be really interesting. I think that if he's available somewhere in the like where the Eagles are picking and the Eagles want to trade back a little bit, I think I could see that happening. Trent McDuffie is somebody I really like a lot. Outside of that, you got your Rodger McCreary, Kaiir Elam, Kobe Bryant. Cam Taylor-Britt from Nebraska is somebody that I think a lot of people like in like the third round. I know Aaron Quinn really likes Cam Taylor-Britt. There's plenty of corners in this draft. So like there's guys that are worth taking in the first round. There's totally guys worth waiting for later if somebody else that you really like in the first round is available. So it depends, and that's sort of the nature of the draft. Is it's just got to play out, and when you're picking at 25, it's a lot murkier to see how things actually play out. For a long time we were used to picking in the top 10 or top 12, so it was like, all right, realistically we could probably get one of these three players and that'll be fine. But when you're picking at 25, it's like, who knows?
Wait and see, right? Yeah, what happens on draft night. We have taken longer than I anticipated, and I know I should have anticipated. I should prepare for the worst, but I didn't. So I do want to talk about Oliver and Gabe Davis here when it comes to the salary cap, because I don't think either of them really factor into draft strategy. You're not drafting an Ed Oliver replacement right now, or a potential long-term Ed Oliver replacement, because you have Ed Oliver for 2 more years. You have Gabe Davis for 2 more years. You're not getting their replacements. But they are guys to look out for in regards to potential contracts. I think, can Gabe Davis extend next year? I think he can.
So this will be his 3rd season. I think he would be available for an extension after 2022. I think.
Well, again, if he has the year we're anticipating, there's going to be discussions next year about a Gabe Davis extension, I am certain. And then with that Oliver, he's going to be coming off of what I assume will be a crazy year as well, benefiting off Von Miller. So I do it. And again, but those don't have to be done next year, but I kind of want them to be done next year.
And the thing with Ed Oliver is, because he's a first round pick, he can be given the 5th year option. And do they have to make that decision about him?
They already have.
They already have. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, they have time to work things out with Ed Oliver, and they absolutely should, because he is very, very good. And for those, what was the wasn't there an article on like NFL.com that was like, revisiting the 2019 draft and who should be given 5th year options, and they were like, Ed Oliver really shouldn't be given the 5th year option because he's really not done anything in the NFL.
Right, look at his sack numbers.
It's like, okay, thanks for not watching any Bills games before making this little blurb about Ed Oliver.
I love that, man. Imagine
where that's your job. Imagine somebody got paid to do that.
But just like, even you don't even have to look at really advanced stats. Well, I guess you do. You have to look at pressures, right? And how the sack numbers don't translate based on how many pressures he has. But regardless, Ed Oliver is an insane player. Yes. I'm glad that he's under contract for the next 2 years. Hope that he's under contract for many more. Okay, so we looked at the salary cap situation, short-term and long-term. How does it impact draft strategy? Linebacker in play earlier than you may think. Safety in play, not necessarily early. Running back in play early, tight end late. Does that wrap up on the salary cap situation? Did we answer the question we set out to answer?
I would hope so.
Okay, moving on. We're now on to segment 2. Hour and 12 minutes, and we're on to segment 2 of the podcast. This one should be quick. State of the roster. We're going to look at holes currently on this roster and how it impacts draft strategy. The most pressing hole, which I've listed immediate holes, which I've defined as players or positions where I don't think the week 1 starter is currently on the roster. The only player or the only position I've listed here is cornerback. I do expect the Bills to draft a cornerback, but that's not anything new. I think basically everyone is mocking a corner to the Bills in round 1 at 25. Yeah. Because it makes sense. They need. I mean, the Bills don't draft for need. Ask Brandon Beane. He'll tell you any day of the week that he doesn't draft for need. He drafts best player available. But when you look at this roster, they need a cornerback.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And like, I believe that they have a certain level of faith in Dane Jackson, who really did play fairly well last year when he came in for Trey White. But normally at this point, the Bills have had every opportunity to sign a veteran cornerback, and so far they haven't, which to me just signals like we really want a corner or two in this draft. So that's I would be shocked if they waited too long to get a corner in this draft. So
Right. Day 2 at the latest. And I feel like this is a conversation we have every year about the cornerback position. Like, oh, we expect the Bills to take a cornerback
I
this
mean,
draft. And they just don't.
in previous years, though, that was to push Levi Wallace off the roster because he was already on there, and like we all like sort of acknowledge like he is who he is, and he's a very solid player right now. But like he's got his ceiling, and he's pretty much hit that ceiling. Whereas now you don't have that fallback. Your fallback is your starter, which is Dane Jackson, and that's fine, I guess. But you need something else. You need something else, man. You just do.
For arguable holes, which is week 1 starter may not be on the roster right now, I've written down running back, which assuming they draft a Breece Hall or a Kenneth Walker, maybe he supplants Singletary, but
sure.
I mean, maybe. And then wide receiver, maybe they get like a Traylon Burks or something, or some guy who technically starts week 1 in a package.
Burks, Olave, Alec Pierce, Wan'Dale Robinson, Kyle Phillips, all these guys, because you can play with 3 receivers as your starters, essentially. It would not be totally surprising if they took a receiver on day 2. Depending on who's available. Because it sounds like based on their draft, like top 30 visits, they're really shopping around and looking at those wide receiver 2 types.
Yep.
Which is really interesting and
Mechie,
not at all surprising. Yeah. So I'm into that.
We didn't take John Mechie in our mock draft, but I am really opening up to the idea of John Mechie because, like we said, he's Canadian. He's actually from Taiwan, but he grew up in Canada. I am telling you, David, there will be a video of him coming to Buffalo for the first time, and he sees a Tim Hortons, and he's like, "Oh, y'all got Tim Hortons?" And then he gets Timbits, and then it gets 1 million views, and the people go crazy. I'm telling you, I am from the future. This is going to happen. And also, I've been caught. The people did catch me slacking. I did forget punter in the.
We did forget punter.
They will have a punter. I think they will. Punt God. I'm telling you, punt God.
I'm all for it. You know,
everyone thinks they're getting punt God.
Right.
The Bills are getting punt God.
There are going to be 31 NFL fan bases that are going to be absolutely grief-stricken and heartbroken when their team does not draft punt God. And one team is just going to be through the roof. One team's fan base is just going to be like, oh my God, we just won the draft.
Bills are going to do it in round 3, baby. Maybe round 2.
God, stop.
Maybe round 2. I was going to say wouldn't shock me, but no, it would. I would. I'm not down with that. Long-term holes. Safety, even though we just had that conversation about safety, it's not a pressing hole. But again, like I said, they're in their early 30s. It's going to be something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. Linebacker is a long-term hole, as we just talked about. Guard is a long-term hole because, again, like we've said, Rodger Saffold is a Band-Aid. They have Ryan Bates under contract for 4 years. But otherwise, I mean, who else do you have at guard long-term?
Right.
You need a guy.
And yeah, we kind of talked about that in our mock draft a few weeks ago when we ended up taking Darian Kennard from Kentucky, where it was like, hey, you got Rodger Saffold, you bring back Rick Bates. We're all totally cool with that, and that's fine. But like, you got to have someone else that you feel really confident in, I think, or at least that you feel like you can coach up in the future, because otherwise you're looking at Cody Ford starting in 2023, and I'm not about that life.
Yucky. He'll still? No. Is this the final? This is the final year of his deal.
Hold on, 2019. He was drafted in 2019.
Yeah.
19.
He was in the Knox.
Yeah. That's the last year of his deal. Never mind. Yeah. So now you definitely need.
Yeah, dude.
Now you really need a guard.
But no, but like, so that raises the question, how early will a guard be taken? I think, look, I like Kenyon Green. I like the idea of Kenyon Green.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want a guard in the first round. I think there are
No.
talented enough guards on day 2 and day 3 with enough Bills connections
Yeah.
that's what they're going to end up taking.
I would be fine depending on certain moves. Like if they traded out of the first round, like we did, yeah, just suggesting it, Brandon. I mean, we've done the simulations. We can get a trade from Atlanta, a second and a third. So if they manage to trade out of the first round and get some extra picks on day 2, like yeah, for sure, get a guy. I would be totally cool with an interior offensive lineman on day 2, but because you have Aaron Cromer and he's the kind of coach that he is, if they want to wait until day 3, yeah, I'm totally cool with that too, because I think he can coach up pretty much whoever he wants, and they're going to be at worst like an average starter in the NFL. So this is when we first did the roster evaluation. What was one of the grades we did? You do you. That's kind of how that's kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at with interior O line. You do you.
John writes, we can always extend Saffold. How old is Saffold?
He's like 33 or 34.
Okay.
I am not about extending Rodger
I mean,
Saffold.
you could give him another 1-year deal, but that's another Band-Aid. That's another.
Yeah. You need a solution here at some point.
And maybe the solution doesn't come this year, but I think they take a shot in like round 2 or day 2 or day 3. Jessica writes, Zion Johnson. I don't. Hey, again, I'm not opposed, or I'm not, dead set against taking a guard in round 1. I just think there are better ways to take it, or better places where you can use the pick. So how do the immediate holes impact the draft strategy? Cornerback early, and then just basically, given how this roster is constructed, you can just really, I mean, that's kind of what the draft is, right? You just rank guys how you like them, and then you add based on how the board falls. But
yeah,
I mean, this roster is really constructed that, I mean, they can take a few risks if they like a guy maybe a round or 2 before he's projected to go. Like I wouldn't be opposed if they take a risk on an athlete that they really like, at guard or wherever, whatever position. So I think that wraps up the whole section. We're moving on here to draft capital. This is a fun discussion we're going to have. I had to do some math for this segment. So looking at the Bills' current draft capital, they enter the 2022 NFL draft with the following selections. Picks 25, 57, 89, 130, 168, 185, 204, and 232. And then for the 2023 and 2024 drafts, they have their own picks only. They haven't traded any of them, but they also haven't acquired any additional picks. So they have 7 next year, 7 the year after, 8 this year. So looking at this draft capital, again, to quote Chernobyl, it is wait, I just looked up and read the randomest comment. What's going on? Kyle, who's our 4th tackle? And if you say Bobby Hart, please slap yourself. Do they have 4 tackles? They have Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Tommy Doyle, touchdown
Bobby
Tom.
Hart.
You have to slap yourself. Apparently,
I'm not doing that. That was not part of the deal.
They'll get a UDFA, or they'll draft a guy late, and they'll figure it out. So Bobby Hart will not be on this roster, but so looking at this draft capital again, we're going to go back to the Chernobyl quote: "Not great, not terrible." You can certainly be in worse positions in terms of draft capital, but it's not like they have a bunch of extra picks that they could use to move around the draft. But I do want to talk about potentially trading up, because I have seen this sentiment where, like, given how this roster is constructed, why don't you kind of sell the farm a little bit, or use the draft capital that you do have? Why don't you use that to get up and then go and get one of the better cornerbacks in the draft, maybe like a Stingley or a Gardner? So looking at that, a package of 25, 89, and 185. So that is your 1st, 3rd, and your top 6th round pick. That gets you to the late teens. So you get up like maybe 6 spots by giving up like a significant portion of your draft capital this year. Moving past that, for 25, 57, and 185. So that is your first, second, and your top six. That gets you to like the mid-teens. That gets you to like 14, 15, 16 range. So I guess as far as you're moving up, unless you're giving up like a future first or a future, whatever picks, if you want to go into future picks and give those up, you're not getting into Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley range.
Yeah.
I guess theoretically you could get into Andrew Booth, Trent McDuffie range. I just don't know if, and again, given the salary cap situation that we talked about, you're going to need late round rookies to be contributors. I do think eventually you will need that. I mean, they need that every year, but especially moving forward, I don't want to expense future draft picks or picks this year to go up and get a Sauce Gardner or someone like that. I understand that the idea, the thought process, I just don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah. And it's great to think about like a player of that caliber being on this team, trying to make a Super Bowl run. It's so much to try and give up to get someone like that on this roster. It's just, we've talked about the various needs that this team needs now and will need in the future. To give up a bunch of assets just to get a corner, even a very, very good corner like a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley or whoever, it's not worth the trade-off.
What about this? I raise you this. Trade Moss to go up, then grab Sauce. That was
Trade
like a
Moss?
You're going to trade Moss, go get Sauce.
What is Sauce? What is Moss command? Like a seventh?
Moss,
like a conditional seventh?
What does Moss equal in value? I don't know. He doesn't move the ticker for teams, I don't think.
No,
it's not like, you were offered 25, 89, and 185, and then they throw in Moss, and they're like, oh, well, now you're talking. Now I'll give up pick 9. Like, I don't think he's that. Edmonds maybe does, but I'm not doing that. Maybe. I'm not using Edmonds to move up. I just, that doesn't make sense to me. Kyle, I'm not against a trade up, but a CB in round 1 will be our CB2, not our CB1 once Trey is back. Is CB2 really worth a first round pick? I understand that, but given I understand, is a CB2 worth trading up for? Maybe not, given that Trey's going to come back and you don't expense that much of your future draft capital to go up there and get a guy who's going to be your CB2. But a cornerback 2 is worth a first round pick, given the current construction of this roster. If you can stay at 25 and land a starting cornerback opposite Trey White for the next 5 years, that I would do that.
Yeah, I mean, it just with the way the NFL is now, when there's so much passing, you gotta have a lot of corners. Now you don't necessarily need to do like what the Dolphins did a couple years ago, where they had Xavier Howard and Byron Jones, and then they drafted Noah Igbinoghene in the end of the first round. But I do think that drafting a corner in the first round, even with like a mild trade up a couple spots, is totally worth it. But if somebody like a Trent McDuffie, Kyler Gordon, Andrew Booth is available at 25 and you don't have to give up anything, heck yes, I'm taking that all day long.
So, David, have we effectively looked at the state of the Buffalo Bills?
I sure hope so, because my voice is getting pretty tired at this point.
I think we have. I think we did a pretty good job of looking at the current state of this roster, the salary cap situation, short and long term, its holds, its draft picks that it has, and how it all impacts the draft. I'm going to ask you this. I think we have 3 shows, including this one, between now and the draft. David, who are they taking at 25? Do they pick at 25? And if so, who are they taking?
I would prefer that they trade back. And if that's not available, I say you look at the corners And if Andrew Booth is there, if Trent McDuffie is there, heck, if even Kyler Gordon is there, I would take them. If they're not available or they're not as high on them as we are, maybe take a running back.
Brees Hall.
Or a wide receiver. Or a wide receiver. Again, that depends on what receivers
You're an
available.
anti-Traylon Burks guy, though, right?
I am not anti-Traylon Burks.
You're driving the anti-Traylon Burks propaganda train.
I am Traylon Burks hesitant.
Again, you can't be having that. See, again, that's a guy who I would be like, oh, we have to start the anti-propaganda train, but I think his test scores did it for him. Like, I think
very true.
His combine kind of did that work for him. Brees is the final piece. I love that. Put it on a t-shirt. Brees is the final piece. I agree. Do Poyer and Moss to move up to get Sauce. Again, I'm liking the alliteration here. It's not alliteration at all. It's rhyming. But
rhyming. there's that degree coming in handy, Kyle.
We've gone on too long. Move Moss to get Sauce. Again, I don't know how they're going to do it, but if somehow it works out, hey, good on you. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. It was a long show. Make sure to stick around for Air Raid Hour. That starts in 30 minutes.
Yes.
Make sure to subscribe to Cover One on YouTube, follow on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, at some variation of @Cover1. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave a review if you want an honest review. I don't want no fake 5-star reviews. I want an honest. I think I've said this, an honest 3-star than a real 5-star, but that doesn't help or a fake 5-star, but that doesn't help the algorithm. So I get distracted so easily. What about new coaches, Kyle? Do we have who's coaching? Who's new coaching? What's going on? That's a great way to break up an outro. Make sure, what else do you have to do? Subscribe to all the Cover One iTunes feeds. There's numerous of them. Leave them 5-star reviews, 1/4 star. If you can do it, go for it. But then leave a 1/4 star review, but then in your review, right? Love the show.
There you go.
I think it's great. It's a great program. That'd be hilarious. Make sure to follow David on Twitter at
DFAUXY @DFoxy.
You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Silagyi. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.